Michael Chong, Conservative Foreign Affairs Critic, Heather McPherson, the NDP Foreign Affairs Critic, who are now regulars on the program. Good to have both of you back. Mr. Chong, you'd asked for a boycott, a diplomatic boycott. They sent one. I hope we haven't just lost Michael Chong, and if we have, we'll go to Heather McPherson. There's Michael Chong. Is this a strong enough signal?
Well, we've been calling for the government to announce a diplomatic boycott for months. And yet again, they're late to the table in making a decision. It's part of a broader pattern of this government where they're late to the table or they don't show up at all. We are still awaiting for the government to make a decision on Huawei. And they recently excluded Canada from the recent Australian, UK, US Defence Pact. So, I think this is a decision that should have been made a while ago. And much sooner than.
But it happens like it happened. It happened a couple hours after the UK and Australia, Heather McPherson. It seems to me, and I'll find out in a minute. There's some kind of coordination. The US does it, then the UK, Australia, and Canada kind of does it. Yes, late. Yes, this has been long called for. What do you make of it? Is this a coordinated response, or is this essentially a Potemkin village? You say something to look like you're doing something, but it's fundamentally not that meaningful.
I mean, I have to say it has been glacially slow, and the government could have come forward with this further. We have been asking for this. They have had the support of all parties in the House of Commons to do this work sooner, and they didn't. I don't get a feeling from this government that they're working very well with our allies at all. So I would be very surprised if that had been done in concert with allies, just because so far we haven't seen the government do the work to develop those relationships with our allies. We know that our strategy around China. Sorry to interrupt. You go ahead.
I just want to push back because we don't have a Liberal on the panel, and I'll put these to the minister. But they did have 70 countries sign off on the treaty against arbitrary detention. The allies showed up. During the two Michaels, you had multiple countries, 30 countries showing up at the embassies in protest. I mean, to be fair, there was a lot of multilateral and support built up on that very issue.
But look at all the places where there wasn't. Michael brings up the point that we weren't at the table for some of the conversations that we needed to be there for. We have not made a decision. The government has not made a decision on Huawei, which means that Canada isn't really a trusted partner to work with some of these allies. And as we go forward, as we try to push the government to have a more coherent, more congruent China policy, what we see is the government hasn't come to the table enough to actually make that happen. They've been absent. They haven't made those decisions. And because of that, Canada's not really one of the players that's involved, to be honest.
So should this signal a stronger shift in Canada-China policy? I mean, I remember you and I, Mr. Chong, were speaking, 6 months ago when you were talking about an all-out boycott or shifting the games away. Now it's a diplomatic boycott. Some regard that as a really strong message. Others basically regard it as a fig leaf and it's meaningless. Should this shift Canada's position vis-a-vis China, and what should it be?
Well, I think this decision taken into the broader context is indicative of a government that's been tepid, that's been equivocating in the face of the threats that China is presenting to Canada and its values. The Prime Minister said something in your opening clip that's simply not true. He said that the Trudeau government has taken a strong stand in defense of human rights. That's absolutely not true. They abstained from a vote in the House of Commons recognizing a genocide was taking place against the Uyghur Muslim minority in Western China. That's not taking a stand in defense of human rights. That's abdication of the defense of human rights. This government's policy on China is utterly and completely incoherent. They said that they were going to come forward with a new framework on China all of last year. That got kiboshed. They then came forward with what Foreign Minister Champagne called the 3 Cs of cooperate, challenge, and compete. Then that changed when Minister Garneau, several weeks after the election, changed the 3 Cs to the 4 Cs, adding the 4th C of coexist. And now we're being told that the government's coming forward with a new policy on China in some time in the next while. It's utter incoherence on this file. We have said they need to come forward with a new policy on China that is in concert, that is in that works more closely with our democratic allies in the Indo-Pacific region, like Australia, like the United States, Japan, India, and the others.
Ms. McPherson, both you and Mr. Chong, I know you're both personally banned from going to China, and I appreciate that, but you've talked about, voted that there is a genocide taking place. Part of this whole discussion is, if there's a genocide taking place, and I know the Canadian government hasn't said so, but the UK and the US and both your parties have said so, how is a diplomatic boycott even remotely a justifiable position if there's a genocide? You know, it's not like we would send athletes to Rwanda during the genocide if Rwanda was hosting the games. There's a genocide. So are we accepting basically a tiny little international feel-good diplomatic boycott to allow ourselves to legitimize inaction over what many regard as a genocide?
Well, and I think it's important, too, to acknowledge that the House of Commons of Canada declared it a genocide. This was a vote in which the entire Liberal Party, except for Cabinet, voted and agreed that this was a genocide. This was unanimous. This came from a report that was done in the International Subcommittee on International Human Rights. So you know, yes, absolutely. And we had called on the government to look at moving these Olympics. I think this puts our athletes in a terrible position. You know, we all want to be supporting our athletes. We all want our athletes to be able to compete in the sports that they have trained for decades to be at. Nobody wants to stop that from happening. But when the government didn't act when we actually had time, this is sort of the low bar that we have left to us. It is a statement, it is important. I do believe that it is an important statement to make, but I also believe that we could have done much more.
Yeah, is it a low bar? Okay, Mr. Chong, Ms. McPherson, great to have both of you on the program.